The best day of your life is when you get a contract from a publisher who wants to publish your book. But it could also be the worst day of your life when you get that contract, because it's written for one purpose only: to make the publisher a lot of money and to take away as many of your rights as possible. But how do you get those rights back? What can you negotiate with? A lot of authors are afraid to negotiate because they don't want to lose the contract. So today, you're going to learn what you can negotiate, what you shouldn't negotiate, and how to have the proper mindset about it all so you get the best possible deal. Hi, I'm Dan Janelle. I'm the author of more than a dozen books, including Write Your Book in a Flash. I'm a book strategist, and I can help you write your book as a ghostwriter, book coach, or developmental editor. Our special guest today is Ken Wachsberger. He is the contract advisor for the National Writers Union and the #1 international best-selling author and editor of You've Got the Time, How to Write and Publish That Book in You. Welcome, Ken.
Well, thank you, Dan. Thank you for inviting me to be part of your podcast.
Well, well, thank you. It's a great pleasure to have you here, because I remember when I got my first contract from John Wiley, I was so thrilled to get a contract. I didn't even know you could negotiate anything. And my agent, not to his credit, really didn't negotiate anything. We just signed it, sealed it, sent it right off. And for the most part, we were happy with it. But when book 2 came along, there were some restrictive clauses in there that we didn't quite realize at first that sort of tied up our hands in a little, in some ways. But that's nitpicking here. I don't think we need to get into it. But let's talk about some of the things that you can negotiate, things that you can't negotiate, and how to have the right mindset about this whole process. So I'm going to leave it to you. I might interrupt and ask questions every now and then, but Ken, you have the floor. What do we need to know?
Okay. Well, I wanted to start off by talking about some of the biggest mistakes that authors make. Contracts are so bad. They're so bad for authors, but especially really the academic press. I've been a contract advisor with the National Writers Union for over 30 years. And way back when, we had a national organizer, and she asked me to organize academic writers. And I was kind of thrown back by that. I didn't realize there was really such a thing as academic writers, but I went about doing it. People in my union were actually opposed to the campaign because they thought, oh, come on, academics don't care about their contracts. But I prefer to look for the facts. And we did a campaign, and we discovered there was a lot of interest. There was ignorance. They didn't know about the contracts. And so one of the big mistakes that people make, and these all, by the way, seem to revolve around the author's willingness or refusal to treat themselves with dignity. They don't even think about that. One of them is not being willing to walk away from a bad contract, to set bottom line issues. You negotiate, you get some, you don't get everything else. But there are certain issues that are so important, and it varies from writer to writer, but there are some issues that are so important that if the publisher isn't willing to give you those, you need to just say, well, forget it, I'm out of here. And a lot of them aren't willing to do that. I think in the academic field, there's a problem with the publisher parish treadmill. If you're an academic, you know what I'm talking about. In order to get tenure, you have to publish a certain amount of times. But more specifically, you have to publish in certain pre-approved, I guess you'd say, publishers, certain imprints. And these imprints, they don't have really the incentive to give you a good contract, because they know that you've got to publish with them. And nowadays, back when you were at the mercy of publishers, but nowadays with the new technology, we don't really need them anymore. We can publish ourselves and totally bypass them. But the issue is that there has to be a way to evaluate the books. In other words, you can't just, that's the reason that there was the emphasis on having certain presses, because we knew the presses were reputable. And there's legitimacy to that. They're reputable presses. If you're published with them, it probably is a hint that your book is reputable. And so that helps with the tenure. And that's legitimate. But there needs to be another way to determine if the book is reputable. It should not have to revolve around certain imprints. It's so easy to publish yourself. We should be encouraged to do that, but we need new ways to look at it. So not being willing to walk away from a bad contract for fear of the publisher parish treadmill in particular, I think is one of the big mistakes. Another one is signing a boilerplate contract. When the publisher says, "We'd like your book, we want you to sign with us," they send you their contract, and it's called the boilerplate contract. It's the one they send to everybody. It's ground to zero. That's what the negotiation begins with that. But too many, I would say, not most, too many authors don't realize that they're allowed to negotiate. I think you mentioned that with your agent. It's either out of ignorance or, again, out of fear that the publisher will dump you as soon as you ask for changes. They're scared to do anything. Publishers can't do that, though. They can't. For one thing, by the time they've sent you a contract, they've already put hundreds, maybe even thousands of dollars into your book, mostly in the way of staff time, editor time. People have to read the book. They have to talk about it with other people on staff, to decide if they want to keep your book versus another book. This all takes time, and they're all getting paid for this. So by the time they say, "Yeah, this is a good book, let's go for it," they've already put that time into it. They can't just walk away. They can't just do that. Remember, they have to keep producing catalogs. They're hoping your book will fill a blank in the catalog. And once they've filled it, they don't want to then unfill it and have to start all over again. So you've got that power there. And you need to be willing to take advantage of it. So they're more than willing to make a few changes, in exchange for you not walking away. So you got to keep that in mind. It's a mindset. We were talking about mindset. You have to self-hypnotize sometimes. Authors really are too often have such low self-esteem when it comes to their books. So you got to convince yourself that you're worth more. You got to look in the mirror and say, "I am a writer. I am a writer." Self-hypnotize. It works, believe it or not. Put it on your tax form under occupation, writer. You got to believe it yourself. But once you do that, you get more power, more courage. With the academics, what I realized is that we're not teachers who write or writers who teach. Because you tend to think of yourself more as one than the other, and so the other one is kind of like the minor part. But you have to convince yourself that you're a teacher and a writer, two different professions, two proud professions, and you need to be treated with dignity in both of them. So that's real important. That's the mindset.
And that can apply to consultants and coaches and speakers and business people.
Oh, absolutely.
As well. Great.
Absolutely.
Ken, that was brilliant in terms of knowing that we have more power than we thought. I certainly didn't realize all the staff time, but you're right. They're invested in you now. You have some power here. So what kinds of things, what kind of clauses can you ask for and reasonably expect them to move on without fear of damaging the relationship?
Well, good question. One of them is the copyright. I put that first. Overall, I'm not going to rank which is most important, which is least. There, it's all depends on you pretty much. But copyright, I think, is up there, no matter who you are. You never want to give that away. You want to hang on to that. Whatever the publisher wants to do with your book, they can do it while you still own the copyright. Okay, you're leasing certain rights to them. Copyright is, you see copyright as a pie, different pieces, and the pieces are the different clauses within the contract that you lease out. If they want to turn your book into your manuscript into a hardcover, into a soft cover, into an audiobook, into an ebook, if they want to turn it into a movie, if they want to translate it, these are all different rights that are controlled by copyright. So you don't have to give them the copyright. You just have to allow them to use those clauses. I had one publisher that said to me, Ken, it would just be so much more convenient if you gave me the copyright. I thought that was brilliant. That was a good line on the publisher's part. It kind of threw me back, but I hung in there and kept the copyright in my name. But there's no reason. Now, the key is exploitation. Okay, exploitation is a bad word. You don't want to be exploited, and I understand that. But in thinking of contracts and rights, you want them to exploit them. What it means is they're using them actively. If your press has an agent in Hollywood turning their books into movies, give them print rights. You don't have somebody there. So if they're actively turning it into a movie, go with it and give them their cut, and you take the cut. It's something you would not have gotten otherwise. But if they have no interest in turning your book into a movie, and of course most academic presses aren't thinking of movies, there's no reason to give them film rights. You don't have to just hang on to it. If Hollywood comes to the press and says, hey, would you like to turn this book into a movie? That was nothing that the press did. It was the book that attracted the Hollywood, not the press. So keep it in your name. Keep it in your name as long as you can. And what you do, you make a change. Any change you make, you want to initial it. So if there are certain rights, like say film rights, that you want to retain, translation rights, whatever else, you just cross it out on the contract. Just cross it out and then initial it. You always have to initial the changes. Sometimes there are total clauses you want to get rid of. Just X it out, but then put that initial in there so it makes it official. So yeah, if they have plans to monetize the right, yeah, go for it. That's what you wanted them. That's what you hired them for. But if they don't, you want to retain it. So that's copyright. That's one of the big ones. One of my favorites, it's the resale clause. What that means, every contract allows the author to purchase some minimal amount of books at some modest discount for their own use. But often the clause will say, but not for resale. It actually says that, but not for resale. And sometimes it says, and if you do buy it at a discount, you lose the royalty that you would have gotten if someone else had bought it at a discount to resell, basically. This is a crazy clause. It's a stupid clause. It's so stupid that it actually hurts the publisher. And remember, the contract is written by the publisher's lawyers. So for the lawyer to write a clause that's going to hurt a client, well, I call this the drunk lawyer clause. It's just so stupid. It's so stupid, so damaging. But the reason behind it is that when you, as the author, get done writing the book, you're no longer merely the author. You're still the author always, But now that the book is done and the book is out there, you're a valuable member of the sales force. I mean, you have more invested in the book than anybody. Don't let the publishers tell you they put money into it. You've got the time, the sweat, the guts. It's your book, and you've put more money, more energy, more anything into it than I'll ever put into it. And it makes sense that you want it to sell, and you want to be able to do it. But it costs you money to promote a book. You know, for you to put up a website, for you to travel to conferences to sell the books. This costs you a lot of money. If you're not making any money on the book itself, on the sales, you can't afford to do that. And if you can't afford to do that, that's sales that the publisher loses also. What I argue for is that you need to be, the clause should allow you to buy the books at the best distributor discount, because now you're a distributor too. If distributors get 50% off to resell it, you should get 50% off to resell. Forget this not for resale. If it says not for resale, cross that off. Just cross it off initially. If it says you're going to lose the royalty, remember that if other distributors, Baker and Taylor, for instance, or any of the other distribution companies, if they buy the book at 50% off to resell, you don't lose the royalty. So there's no reason why, if you personally buy it to resell, you should lose the royalty.
So it seems, Ken, that would be an easy clause for most smart publishers to easily give in on, so you should ask for this. I remember in my contracts, there were clauses that said you can buy any number of books at X number of dollars. And I don't remember if that was related to the publisher's discount or whatever, or if it was their actual cost of printing the book at, say, $6 or $7, which would have been way below any other kind of discount. So that'd be something else that you could ask for. But again, publishers are usually pretty happy to agree to.
Well, this is a clause I think that should be pretty easy to get. I mean, if a publisher doesn't understand that it's to their advantage, let's put it this way.
Let's move on.
Go ahead. Okay.
What other things can we reasonably?
Okay. Well, better promotion of your books.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean,
good luck on that one.
Yeah. Right. Well, here's what you do. Okay. It's known as the worst kept secret in the industry that publishers do not promote their own books. By the time your book comes out, there are already 2 or 3 catalogs ahead of you. They've lost interest in your book. And in most contracts, at least within academic circles, are going to say that they don't have anything for promotion in the book. But here's what you can do. And here again, there's no reason why publishers should say no to it. Most academic presses are nonprofit. They're tax deductible nonprofit organizations. That means that when people donate to them, they get a tax write-off. So what you can do is say to the publisher, I want to be able to take advantage of your nonprofit status. Most of them are going to say, sure. I mean, once you explain it, they're going to say, sure, no problem. And then you go to your friends, your relatives, anybody else who's looking for an end of the year tax write-off, and just tell them to donate to the press. But the key is what they need to do, and there's no reason why the publisher should say no to this. But the key is you need to have them earmark the donation to the press, and in particular to your book. They say this is a donation for Dan's book. Okay, the reason is because otherwise, if they just donate to the press, it's going to get incorporated into the general fund, and you're never going to see it. So make sure they earmark it for your book. And then what you do is just make contact with an editor, who's handling your book, and just say, hey, when I get a donation, let me know. And they're more than happy to do that. I took with one of my books, I got a lot of invitations to speak at conferences, and the press said, great, happy to hear it, but they weren't willing to put any money into it. But what I did was I raised money. I raised a lot of money that enabled me to travel, to stay places, and my friends got tax write-offs. I was happy to give them that gift of a tax write-off. So that's one they should have no problem giving you. And another thing they should do on that same that same track is send you their press releases. I mean, some of us know how to write press releases, but most authors don't. They have no idea how to write a good press release. But the press does. So get them to send you the press release, and then what you do is just tweak it to personalize it, to make it come from your website rather than the press's website, and sell books through it. What happens when when they give you 50% is that they're no longer making 100% of the money, minus the little royalties. They're only making 50%. But the difference is that when they were making 100%, it was 100% of no sales because you're not selling it. Okay, if you don't have a good resale clause. If they give you the 50% discount, they're now only making 50%, but it's of something because you're making sales. It's worth it. Let me give you just one example. I edited a 4-volume set of books for a company called Facts on File. It's an academic press, okay? But they understood that the whole idea. They gave me 50% off. The 4-volume set sold for $140, okay, which is a lot of money. But I would walk into a library. I'd say, here's the book. Do you want to buy it? The 4 books. It was 4 volumes. They say, sure. They'd give me a check for $140. I'd walk out. I'd send $70 to Facts on File. That's $70 they wouldn't have otherwise. And meanwhile, I've got $70. Okay. So it was really nice. It was worth it to me, and it was free money to them. That's what you need to emphasize. Not that it's less than 100%. It's free money. They would not have had it. Their best sales force isn't going to be able to come up with some of the places that you're going to go to. So there's no reason why they shouldn't want to do that.
Right. Ken, a lot of authors want to have control over their covers, but a lot of publishers want to have control over their covers too. What have you found works in this situation? Can you negotiate the cover rights?
That's a tough one because they, like you said, they have the final say on it. You certainly can offer suggestions. There's a clause in the contract that will say that you can have input. That's probably as good as you're going to get on that. If they publish it, they're going to have the say on it. I haven't been crazy about some of the covers that I had, but you just kind of go with it.
Yeah, in the case of my book, which you can see over here,
Yeah.
the original one actually had a picture of a light bulb, and I said, light bulb means smart, it means idea, it doesn't mean fast. And so they came back and they put a lightning bolt on there, like, okay.
Oh, okay.
So we
a little different.
They listened, not what I would have put on the cover of a book,
Uh-huh.
but publishers sell lots of books, they know what works, they know what doesn't work. And there are a lot of considerations in terms of what works on Amazon. I'm wondering if we could do a rapid fire kind of back and forth of, what are some tips that people can do and negotiate for, what you should not even think about negotiating for without getting too deep into the weeds.
Okay, well, I'll try not to go too deep. I mentioned a couple already. The out of print clause is one that needs to be changed. In the old days, well, pretty much from the beginning of contracts, I think, there's been some version of available for sale through normal retail and wholesale channels. Something like, some version of that. Normal channels referred usually to bookstores. And available for sale meant primarily that the publisher, had it in your warehouse. Which has a physical address. Okay. All of a sudden, we can now publish, print on demand. So that means that when the warehouse is totally empty, and they get an order for your book, they just call up whatever company is printing their books out and they say, I need one book, send it here. And so the publisher, the printing company, they print out the book, they send it, The publisher never sees it. You never see it, but it's another sale. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. But what that means, though, is that according to the old contract that says available for sale, it's always going to be available. And so there will be so the out of print clause really translates into your book is never out of print. So this is not an easy one to change, but it needs to be changed. I would consider this a bottom line issue, that if they don't change it, I don't go with them. What you want to do is get some kind of, make the factor the level of royalties that you receive over a certain period of time. For instance, you could say the work will be deemed out of print if no royalty has been issued in two successive royalty periods. That's an example. And then you can say whereupon the rights are automatically granted, are automatically reverted to the author.
Cool.
The reason you want that is because they don't. Otherwise, you're going to have to ask for it, and they may not tell you. Go ahead. What are you going to say?
Yeah, cool. I've actually seen some contracts where instead of if the book didn't reach a certain dollar amount of royalties, then the rights would revert back to the author as well. So say less than $100 or something like that. But let's talk about the issue of royalties itself. Can you negotiate the royalty fees that you are paid in a contract, or do they stand firm on that?
That can go both ways. I've seen examples where, my authors who I was advising, they were able to get more royalties, and that's fantastic if they can do that. Often publishers stand firm on that you can't go anywhere. Some do, though, and it's certainly worth asking for. One line talking about the mindset. One line that authors want to memorize is, that seems a little low to me.
I love it. That seems a little low to me.
Seems a little, no matter what they say, just seems a little low to me. That was one of the first bits of advice I got when I first became a contract advisor. That was way back when, and I've never forgotten that. And when I thanked the guy, he said, "Nah, someone else told me that." So it's been in the National Writers Union lore for many years. So
I'm glad we could pass that along to our
yeah,
listeners.
no, absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have one or two more quick clauses that we can negotiate on, and maybe one or two clauses that we just know that they're not going to give in on at all?
Well, absolutely. Another clause: if the manuscript gets rejected, you want to make sure that they present you with a clear list of the reasons why it was rejected and what you can do to fix it. Why is this important? Your book can be signed by an editor who loves it, loves the book, made sure it ran through the approval process. And so you sign on, then all of a sudden, there's a lot of turnover in the industry. All of a sudden, the editor leaves, another editor comes in instead, and that editor isn't as crazy about your book. Okay? They just don't have the heart in it. It doesn't mean it's a bad book. It's just every editor has certain books that they're interested in. So they could easily reject the book because they're not interested in it. And they'll give you some reason like it just doesn't, it wasn't up to standards. What does that mean? What does that mean? That's a generic way. But if they give you specifics, and say, here's why we rejected it. If you do this, we'll accept it. You've got something you can work with. So it's real important to get that kind of a clause in the book, in the contract. A real easy one to get rid of is the method of manuscript delivery. In the old days, it would say, send us 2 double-spaced copies of your manuscript. Okay, that makes sense because they wanted to pass them around to multiple editors, and so you have 2 copies, and then they wrote all their comments on the manuscript and sent it back to you. Well, nowadays, nobody edits off of print. Not a complete book. They use electronic, so that means that you need to send them an electronic version. And that makes sense. But if they haven't erased that other clause about the print, I mean, the new contracts, in other words, will acknowledge the sending it as an attachment, but they haven't all gotten rid of that clause that says you need to send it as a print. So just cross that out, initial it, and just keep the part about sending it electronically. That should be a real easy one. I've never, ever known anybody to object to that. And in fact, if they object to it, that's a real key to me that this is a publisher that probably is not fit to handle your book if they can't even, edit the right way.
Sure. Let me raise two options that were my contracts with Wiley years ago. One was the right of first refusal on my next book. I actually thought that was a great clause because it meant that they were interested in my next book. So we left that in. So you as the expert, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
That was the next thing I was going to say, actually.
Yeah.
Well, there are two that are related. One is the obligation to give them the first crack at your next book. That's like if you go to a hospital and give birth to a child, but the hospital says you have to come here without your next child also. To me, it's comparable to that. Once one book, every contract should deal with just that book. If they like it's nice that they want to look at it again, but they're not really saying we're interested. They're just saying don't go anywhere else. And too often they saddle you with the same bad type of a contract. That's one that I cross out an initial and I don't look back. And no, again, I've never seen anyone say, no, that has to stay in there. The other one, the one that's related to that is the obligation to do a second edition, a revised edition. The reason this is a problem, there are two clauses in the contract often. One is the escalating royalty clause, which means that you first get some low percentage of royalty, like say 10%. But if the book sells 3,000, you go up to 12.5%. If it sells another few thousand, you get 15%. That's called the escalating royalty clause. And it's good to have that in there. So, some of them are just flat 10% or whatever. So you want to get that in there. But there's another clause too, and that's called the cumulative clause, which means basically when you go from the first edition to the second edition, the sales that you've made so far in the first edition carry over. Why is this a problem? It could be because it's too easy for your book in the first edition to sell just enough to get up to that next escalating rate. And then all of a sudden, poof, it goes into a second edition and you start back at zero again. So you don't want that. So you want to make sure they keep the cumulative clause in the escalating and the cumulative. You want to keep both of them in there for the second edition. Now, that said, if you don't want to do a second edition, I cross that one off. If you are going to do a second edition, make sure they define when and how often. They can't just say, oh, another day, let's do another edition of your book, because it takes a lot of work, as you know, to do a second edition. Maybe you don't want to do it at all. A couple of my books, all of my books, really, no, that's not true. One book I did, but other books, I had no desire to do a second edition, just crossed it off, and they didn't care. They didn't care.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that was the second clause that I was going to mention that was in my contract. I think they call it the co-accounting clause. It might be slightly different than what you mentioned. It might be the same thing. I'm not quite sure. But they basically said, if your first book doesn't earn out, we'll take any of the earnings from the second book and apply that to the deficit of the first book. So that may be related to what you're talking about. Fortunately, my book earned out, so it didn't come into effect. But I was kind of upset that my agent, who should have known about such things, should have crossed that one out, because that one would have been a killer.
I had that in one of my books, another 4-volume series. And, if one fell low, but the other one made it, they would take it out of that one. And I actually negotiated to get rid of that. I haven't looked at my contract in a while. I think I got rid of it, and I think they have not honored it. And I wasn't very wise as far as reviewing my royalty statements and challenging them on that. But that is a good one to get rid of if you can.
Ken, as we close up here, let me ask you one final question.
Go ahead.
Should you hire a literary attorney to look over your contracts, or is there enough material in this podcast and other sources online to help the average author negotiate a good contract?
We always said in the National Writers Union that although technically we're not lawyers, some of us are lawyers, but most of us were not lawyers, but we knew so much about contracts as a group. Our contract and grievance division, our grievance and contract division, it was called, that if you, as a member of the union, you got free contract advice. That was a real perk of joining the union. And you know what? When they got advice from us, they didn't need a lawyer. In fact, a lot of lawyers came to us for advice. So I would say join the union and get a contract advisor. That would be the National Writers Union, nwu.org. Join the union and ask for a contract advisor. We had many members who joined just because they were looking at their first contract and they wanted contract advice. So
that's great.
Yeah.
That's great advice, Ken. And one final word for me, I guess, is that you should never hire a regular attorney to look at a book contract, because there are just so many things that are specific to the industry that only people who are well versed in all these clauses can really make an intelligent decision on.
Absolutely. So, and as you discovered, one other thing, just having an agent isn't good enough. The agent, remember, and this isn't a criticism of agent, it's just a reality. Agents are in it for the money. They can love your book, but if they don't think they can sell it, they're not gonna represent you. And if they do sell it, they're gonna negotiate the contracts that are gonna bring them money. They're not likely to necessarily think of the copyright even. They may, hopefully, but it doesn't save them any or make them any money if you keep your copyrights. They're not going to think of that. So yeah, just having an agent is not enough.
Good point. Thank you very much, Ken, and thanks everyone for listening. We have dozens and dozens of other videos here on this YouTube channel to help you write, market, and protect your book so you can write your book in a flash. Thanks everyone for being here today. Bye.